So I'm starting this video over because I started reading verses from Paul, um, and it got 7 minutes in before I started actually talking about Gnosticism, because Gnosticism is interesting and there's a lot of misinformation out there. Dale Martin, who teaches at Yale, and as well as other scholars, believe that the book of Romans was written um, in response to the Church of Rome getting very pissed at Paul for writing things like Galatians and Second Corinthians. And what is this that you're talking about? Are you're preaching antinomianism? Because if you look at those works, they seem antinomian. Um, now, there are those on here. There's a guy that goes by the name of Gnostic Truth who won't respond to anything, right? And there's a guy who I actually like a lot of his videos and agree with a lot of his politics. He was a Satanist for a long time. I think he just not renounced his Satanism, but said he's no longer identifying as a Satanist anymore. Who talked about Gnosticism and didn't know the first thing about it. Said basically described gnosis as the pleroma or the monad, and that gnosis is just this endless sea of light where there's every no, gnosis just means knowledge. The Gnostics, it was because they had secret knowledge, and it was an epithet. Calling someone a Gnostic is like calling them a know-it-all. Now, I've covered the archons, which, if you remember that passage in the Pauline corpus, it's not one of the 7 authentic works of Paul, but it talks about archangels, angels, thrones, dominions, principalities. Those are all the levels of the archons, right? And the 72 archons that rule the world. But the misinformation about the Gnostics that's out there, and it is ludicrous. Now, did people now, not all Gnostic groups are the same. They competed with each other, and as I said before, you had 3 main groups in the beginning. You had the Judaizers, which were like the Ebionites, the Achazites, the Nazarenes. Those would be considered the Judaizers. And some of those groups actually adopted some of the Gnostic teachings, which is kind of weird if you think about it. And then you had the Gnostics on the other extreme, which were part of the Docete, like Marcion. But Marcion was not a Gnostic because he didn't have secret teaching, and anybody could be a Marcionite. But again, he believed in the demiurge, that the God of the Old Testament was an evil God, and not the God of Jesus, not the Father of Jesus. That the physical world was created by the evil God of the Old Testament, and that Jesus was fully spirit because matter was evil. And this is what the Gnostics believed as well. Then there was the Catholicoi, the Catholic Church, right? Now, I'm not speaking about modern day Roman Catholicism, but I think most people know when you talk about Catholic, meaning the first few centuries of Christianity, there wasn't even a single bishop in Rome. There was a group of elders, right, at this time. But Catholic, why it was called Catholic, the universal church, meant it was because men and women could both join. Children could join, the poor could join, the rich could join, slave, free, Greek, Jew, barbarian, civilized, everyone was welcome in. the Gnostics, no women, no slaves, no children. The Ebionites, no rich people, and you had to convert to the form of Judaism they were practicing, and they all had their kind of weird forms of Judaism, and it was to what extent that some demanded circumcision. Um, we even see this in the New Testament where Paul circumcises people until he stops and says, "Oh yeah, we probably shouldn't be doing this." Um, so he kind of got swayed. It wasn't just Peter that gets swayed, but Paul. Um, so what about the Albigensians, also known as the Cathars? Well, they get called Cathars, but they're not the same Cathars that were talked about at Nicaea, right? The righteous ones, again, another kind of slander. Um, but you had a group, the Paulicians, right? And they, uh, this was, these were like the last of the ancient Gnostics, right? Because you had the Basilidians, you had the Ophites, the Southians, the Valentinians. Oh yeah, another thing with the Gnostics is that the ones that did see some use in the Old Testament saw that the serpent in the garden was Christ, because remember, the Creator God is evil. Nature itself, the material world, is bad. If you look at the natural world and you think it's beautiful, you're a fool and you're dying. If you think romantic love is a good thing, you will perish and die. Um, if you, again, sex, childbirth, well, that's the worst thing in the world, because again, you're pulling a soul out of the pleroma and entombing it in a flesh body, right? And in some cases, with the Gnostics, that they're forced to go. They have the idea of reincarnation, but some of them, it's just you pull that soul out of eternity and you just kill it as it dies, as it becomes mortal in the body and then dies. So it was once immortal, and now you've made it mortal by procreating. Um, but you had the last that we have of the Gnostics was the Paulicians, which when they got into the Balkans were known as the Bogomels, and then in the Languedoc region, France were known as the Albigensians or the Cathars. And again, they believed a lot of these same things. And now, if you believe the body is evil, right, and celibacy is mandatory, uh, they had this thing that there was the perfecti, and the perfecti, once they achieved perfectness, they would abstain from eating and starve themselves to death to rid themselves of this horrid thing called the human body. Um, so they could be 100% spirit and go back to God. All right. Because they were the Gnostics, all the Gnostics were Dakate. But not all the Dakate were Gnostics, because you had Marcion, who got called a Gnostic all the time, but by the modern day definition of Gnosticism, not a Gnostic, because he didn't have secret teachings, and anybody could join his movement, right? He just hated the God of the Old Testament. Um, he thought, how could God be jealous and stuff like this? And it's kind of funny because he was the son of a priest, and he lived in the region of Pontus where the Epistle to the Galatians was written to. Now, again, this is before the Bible was consolidated. He actually was the one who tried to start his own canon, which in reaction the church actually started putting together a canon. Imagine if you grew up and all you had was the epistles of the Galatians. Yeah, you'd think the God of the Old Testament was bad news or whatever, and you know, yeah, hey man, free, just love everybody and everybody's equal, and hey, we're free in Christ and this and that, and the idea of God commanding you to kill somebody or stoning people to death, that it was a terrible shock to him when he read the Old Testament. He said, "This is not the God of Christ. This is an ugly, hate-filled God who's stupid." Um, but yeah, the Gnostics, even the modern day ones, will admit that they're arrogant. They believe that they're part of the elite. They're better than other people. And this is something that's always ran through Gnostics, even this fake pseudo Gnostics today, because Gnosticism and paganism aren't the same thing. But nowadays, people try to say that they are, and it's not. Um, but they'll say, yeah, we do have special knowledge. We are more enlightened than you. We are more enlightened than the rest of the sheeple. We are more spiritually advanced than everybody else. And you'll see this. The cult of gurus. Every Gnostic group has, their guru and their cult type thing, and they're relativists, but they're power hungry, and this is what we'd see. And many times, this is why monasteries were not allowed until Saint Anthony the Great really showed that it could be. You could have people living away from the world just in prayer, a bunch of celibate men, because celibate men living together in the desert, um, or away from society, that's exactly what the Gnostics did. And all they did was educate themselves and read and write, and not contribute to the world, abstain from the world. So church said, okay, you actually have to go in and actually have to help people. You must help people. You must, care for the sick and everything. Kind of how hospitals got set up. And yeah, you have to be overseen by a bishop who's not part of this monastery stuff. And I think one of the problems within the Orthodox Church today is that there are some monasteries that act as cult-like entities or are near Gnostic. But yeah, the idea that the Gnostics, you have groups slandering each other, saying, "Oh, well, the Capocratians, they, would have sex with everybody and they'd eat feces and drink menstrual blood," and no, they didn't. Um, but yeah, the Gnostics were for the rich, educated, older men who abstained from sex, um, romance, marriage, rejected the world, and um, tried to gain immortality through um, this secret knowledge and basically bypassing the archons and the demiurge, um, and thought all those people who were married and having children were just doomed to death because they were in the cycle that the demiurge had started, and that they were worshiping a false god. Um, and that even most of the apostles got it wrong, because it was only basically Paul who saw the resurrected apostle, or saw the resurrected, actual, real Christ, the fully Logos, not trapped in human flesh or appearing in human form, but transcended. Others then said, "Oh, well, we have secret teaching of John or James." James, kind of a strange character, since he was bishop of Jerusalem, and he was Judaizer basically. But yeah, they all begin off like, yeah, this is what he told me in secret. You know, pulled me away from the rest of the apostles, told me this in secret. Well, then why are you telling us this? Why is it written down? And why are you teaching it to other people? So the savior of the universe that you claim was, came down from, you know, the monad or Barbello, the god that is way beyond everything else, and uh, you know, the top of the top, came down and preached lies to everybody so that they believed that the monad and Barbello were the demiurge, and then just told one of the apostles, told him not to tell anybody, but then 150 years later, these works show up. So if you look at the modern day Gnostics, a lot of them don't know what the hell they're talking about, don't even know the definitions of words, haven't even read any of the early works. Um, and Gnostic truth is a perfect example. But when you see him, that's how a lot of the Basilidians were. If you want to see a true Gnostic, a true Valentinian, James F. Pandirasbox. I don't think he's making any more videos, but check out Pandirasbox. I'll put a link, or at least just the spelling of it. You can find it real easy. True Valentinian. The only person I've run into that was actually believed what the Gnostics believed back in the day. I disagree with him, of course, but yeah. All right. Peace to you.